I remember the first time I ever stayed by the lake, deep in the forest, where the fog draped itself over the water like a whispered secret. The air was damp, carrying the faint hum of unseen insects, and the rustle of leaves in the wind I couldn't feel on my skin. The trees leaned close, their branches brushing each other like cautious strangers. At night, the pale light of the moon barely pierced the mist, turning everything into blurred shadows, shapes that seemed familiar until I blinked and they weren't. I thought I was alone, but every time I shifted in my cabin bed, I could hear soft creaks, the kind that don't belong to a floorboard or an old wall. Somewhere across the lake, the water lapped as if someone was waiting just beneath the surface. But when I peered into the fog, I saw only reflection. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, my imagination, anything but what my gut was screaming. And then, just as I settled into the uneasy calm, I saw it, a silhouette standing at the edge of the water, still, unmoving, watching me, as if it had been waiting all along. That's when I realized I never should have opened the door. The mist hung low over Mirror Lake. A pale light stretched across the water, soft, hesitant. The surface was still, almost like glass, yet it didn't feel calm. I stepped closer, boots sinking into the damp grass, and saw shapes gliding beneath the water. Not fish, not anything I could name. They moved deliberately, slowly, waiting. The reflection of the trees twisted in the fog. Branches bent in impossible angles. Leaves shimmered like they were breathing. I blinked, and the shapes below didn't flinch. A hum rose from the forest beyond the shore. Low, almost gentle, but it pressed against my chest. I felt it in my ribs, vibrating with something I couldn't see. Silence followed, heavy and thick. It made my ears ring. The fog swirled and clung to my skin. Each breath I drew tasted cold, metallic. I stepped onto a dock that stretched like a thin spine over the lake. The wood creaked under me. I thought I saw a footprint behind me, pale, wet, but when I turned, nothing was there. The water shifted again. A shadow broke the surface for a heartbeat and vanished. No ripples remained, only fog, curling like smoke from a distant fire. The humming grew, then receded. Leaves rustled without wind. A chill ran along my neck, and I felt eyes, countless, unseen, following me. I knelt at the edge of the dock. Water lapped softly at my hands. It was colder than it should have been, almost alive. The shapes moved beneath, closer now. The forest reflected in the lake was wrong. Trees bent toward the water. Trunks twisted like hands reaching for the sky. The fog made it impossible to tell where the land ended and the water began. A soft splash echoed somewhere behind me. I froze, listening. My heart beat like a drum against my ribs, yet the world stayed still. Only the hum returned, faint, persistent, like it was calling my name. I could smell damp soil and decaying leaves, the sharp tang of water that shouldn't exist in a place this still. The mist clung to my hair, cold and wet. Every instinct told me to run, but my feet refused. Something brushed against my ankle. I froze. The water stirred. Shadows passed beneath my gaze, too wide, too slow, too deliberate. I felt the lake pull at me, gentle at first, then insistent. A whisper of movement in the fog, and the reflection of the trees quivered. I realized the lake wasn't just still, it was waiting. I stepped back. The dock trembled, faint under my weight. The fog swirled tighter, curling around my legs like hands. I heard a soft rustling, like leaves brushing skin, but no wind moved. The humming softened, fading into nothing. Silence stretched, endless and oppressive. Even the shapes beneath the water seemed to pause, holding their breath. I looked across the lake one last time. The reflection had returned to something recognizable, almost. But the shadows lingered, slow and deliberate, just under the surface. I turned away, walking back toward the trees. Each step sounded impossibly loud in the quiet. The mist followed, curling around my shoulders. I didn't look back, but I could feel it. The lake, the fog, the hum, all of it waiting for me to stop moving. And I knew it would. The cabin smelled of pine and smoke. Outside, the night pressed close, cold and silent. I lay in bed, blankets heavy against my skin. Soft footsteps scratched across the wooden floor. Slow, deliberate, like they knew I was listening. I held my breath, feeling the vibration through the mattress. The windows fogged over without reason. A pale mist formed inside, curling along the glass. I could see my reflection, stretched, twisted, unfamiliar. Shadows appeared on the walls, then vanished. They lingered for a heartbeat too long, then melted into the darkness. A faint whisper drifted through the room. My name, so soft it was almost imagined, but my stomach tightened and my hands went cold. The cabin felt familiar. Every corner known, every creak remembered. And yet, I didn't recognize anymore. The footsteps continued, circling, stopping, moving again. Each scrape on the floor sent a shiver up my spine. I tried to listen for wind, for animals, for reason, but there was only the echo of deliberate steps. The fog windows glimmered with pale light. Shapes swam behind condensation, impossible to define. I reached out to wipe it clear. A coldness pressed against my fingers. Not from outside, from something closer. The whisper came again, this time longer, almost a sigh, almost my name, but stretched and wrong. I felt the floor tremble beneath the steps, not violently, just enough to remind me I was not alone. The shadows returned, moving along the walls in ways my eyes couldn't follow. They bent around corners. They lingered near the bed, where the blankets pulled around me. I wanted to speak, to call out, to ask who was there, but my voice stayed buried in my throat. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. Silence pressed in, thick, heavy, so heavy I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. A soft, rustling brush passed my shoulder. I froze, waiting for a shape, a movement, a sign. Nothing came, only the lingering feeling of presence. The windows cleared slowly, as if exhaling. The cabin exhaled with them. I could see the moonlight on the wooden walls, familiar yet strange. The whisper returned once more, fainter now, almost like a memory. I wasn't sure if it came from the room, the air, or somewhere deeper. I pulled the blankets tighter. The footsteps had faded, but the weight of them lingered. Every shadow seemed alive. Every corner held its breath. I lay still, listening. The wind whispered outside. The trees swayed and the cabin groaned. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too loud. I only waited. The room felt empty and full, simultaneously. I could feel it in the air, watching, waiting, patient. Sleep came slowly, reluctant, with a memory of soft footsteps scratching the floor behind me. And even then, I could feel it, just beyond the edge of the bed. The forest smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Morning light sifted through the branches, pale and hesitant. I walked slowly, boots sinking into soft moss. A flicker of pale light danced between the trunks. I paused, heart quiet but alert. It moved with no wind, no rustle, almost like it was breathing. Branches scraped my arms. The scent of wet bark clung to my fingers. I could feel the forest holding its breath. The glow lingered at the edge of vision. I thought someone or something was following, but no footsteps came. No rustling of leaves. Only the softness of the air, still and thick. I reached for a tree trunk. Rough bark pressed against my palm. Then I noticed the markings. Symbols carved into the wood. Fresh, shallow, but deliberate. The glow flickered closer. Or maybe I drifted nearer to it. Shadows stretched unnaturally. The forest seemed tilted. A thin mist wound around my ankles. It smelled of moss and something faintly metallic. The light pulsed once, then vanished. I stopped listening. The silence was heavy, almost tangible. Only the occasional drip of water from a high branch. Only my breath, loud in my ears. The markings repeated, deeper into the forest. Lines and circles I couldn't understand. I traced one with my fingertip. Cold, smooth, alive. The forest seemed to shift behind me. Branches bent without wind. Shadows leaned just out of reach. The glow returned, faint this time, teasing between trunks. I walked toward it, careful. The ground was soft, moss giving underfoot. The air hummed, almost audible in the stillness. Each step felt both empty and watched. Then it disappeared again. No warning, no trace. I blinked, and the forest was normal or normal enough, except for markings etched deeper into the bark. I could feel eyes on me, not human, not animal, just presence, patient, lingering in the pale light that was gone. The forest pressed closer. I shivered despite the warmth of the sun creeping through. Every breath carried the smell of damp pine and earth. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me. I followed the path of symbols, moving slowly. Branches brushed my face. Leaves dripped onto my shoulders. The ground pulsed softly underfoot, like the forest had a heartbeat. The light returned once more. A flicker, pale and quick, like it didn't want to be seen. It hovered beyond a small clearing. I approached. Nothing waited. Only mist curling around roots. I knelt by one of the carved trees, tracing the symbol with my fingers. I could feel a faint vibration beneath the bark. Alive, waiting. The glow faded completely, and the forest sighed. The silence returned, thick and oppressive. Even the hum of life seemed distant, muted. I stood, brushing moss from my clothes. The path ahead was empty. The markings still lingered on the trunks, pale and deliberate. The air held its breath, patient, expectant. I walked on, careful, slow, listening to nothing, feeling everything. And I knew the light had not gone. It was simply waiting. The lake was calm, pale morning light stretching across the water. Mist curled along the shoreline, soft and slow. The air smelled of wet wood and moss, heavy with quiet. I walked to the edge and froze. My canoe wasn't where I'd left it. The rope was tied tight last night. Now, it drifted gently, rocking with an unnatural rhythm. Water rippled around it, uneven, almost deliberate. Not wind, not current. The lake felt aware. I reached out to grab the paddle. The wood was cold, damp with dew. The reflection of the trees in the water shifted. Slowly, unnaturally. Branches bent where none should. Shadows moved in ways the light didn't touch. A faint laugh drifted across the lake. Soft, high-pitched, almost human. It fluttered through the mist and vanished before I could locate it. I held my breath. The canoe swayed gently, teasing, patient. The air smelled faintly metallic, like the lake had exhaled something old and forgotten. Ripples widened across the surface, though no wind stirred. The reflection of myself wavered. Not just my face, my shape, stretched and bent as if the water were alive. I crouched, touching the edge of the canoe. Cold, slick with slid under my fingers. The ripples lapped against my hands like soft fingertips. The laugh returned, fainter now, curling around the trees. Not cruel, not angry, just watching. The forest pressed against the shoreline. Mist curled between trunks, pale and deliberate. Every shadow seemed to hold its breath. I could hear the hum of the water beneath the surface. Slow, steady, patient. The canoe drifted closer, almost as if it wanted me to climb in. The rope stretched, taut, and yet slack at the same time. I felt the lake's weight pressing against my chest. The light shifted. The reflection of the trees bent toward me. A soft rustle brushed the leaves behind me. I spun. Nothing moved. Only my own breathing, loud, ragged, aware. The canoe rocked again, gently, deliberately. Ripples shimmered, reflecting shapes that weren't there. Faint laughter tickled the air. It was gone as quickly as it came. I stepped back from the edge. Cold dew soaked my shoes. The lake stayed still, calm yet alive. Every ripple, every shadow, every soft movement felt deliberate. I looked at the canoe one last time. The rope held it, and yet it drifted, as if it had learned how to move on its own. I walked away slowly, the mist curling around my legs. The laughter whispered again, faint, almost shy. The canoe floated, silent and patient, waiting, and I knew it would not stay tied forever. The fog lay thick across the clearing. Every tree vanished into pale white mist. The air smelled damp, earthy, with a hint of something metallic. I stepped carefully, boots sinking into wet moss. Every rustle made my skin prickle, leaves shifting, branches brushing, and yet no wind stirred. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. It vanished when I turned. The fog swallowed it, leaving only uncertainty. I called out, softly, my voice trembling. It was swallowed instantly. No echo, no answer, only the fog pressing closer. A shape moved ahead. Fleeting. Wrong. Not quite human. Not quite animal. It twisted, stretching against the mist, and disappeared. The ground was slick underfoot. The fog clung to my clothes, cold and wet. Every breath I drew tasted of damp earth. Every rustle sounded impossibly near. Something watched me. I couldn't see it. Not fully, only hints. Shadows shifting between trunks. The feeling of eyes, patient, deliberate. I stepped forward slowly. Branches scraped my arms. A soft static hummed at the edge of perception. I froze. The rustling stopped, then started again, closer this time. A fleeting figure appeared. Too tall, too thin, bending in ways that hurt my eyes. I blinked. Gone. The fog pressed against my face. Every inhale was wet and cold. My heart thumped in the silence. I could feel the presence moving with me, always just behind. I whispered, my voice shaking. The mist swallowed it. Only rustling responded. Soft, deliberate, circling. The shapes returned, briefly, at the edge of perception. Thin, wrong, impossible. They flickered like shadows in candlelight. I couldn't look directly. I couldn't look away. The fog thickened. It was all around me now. The forest had vanished. Only white, only the presence. I could smell wet bark, pine, and something older. I stopped moving. The rustling paused. Silence fell. Heavy, suffocating. I felt the eyes on me, patient. Waiting, I pressed my hands against my face. Cold mist seeped through my fingers. The shapes had vanished. Only the rustling remained, faint, distant, teasing. I stepped back. The fog shifted as if exhaling. Branches bent, brushing my shoulders, leaving wet streaks on my skin. I breathed slowly. The mist thinned slightly, revealing trees again. The forest was still, quiet, familiar, and yet not. I moved forward carefully. Every step measured, deliberate. The rustling followed, always at the edge, waiting for me to look back. And I didn't. I kept moving, feeling the presence linger in the fog. Even as the sun began to burn pale light through the trees, I knew it had not left. It was patient, waiting. The cabin smelled with smoke and cold pine. Night pressed close, dark and heavy. The floor creaked softly beneath my feet. The lights flickered. A pale glow stretched across the walls, then vanished. Shadows bent strangely, as if the room itself breathed. I ran my hand along the table. Rough wood, cold and damp. Something was different. The mugs I left neatly aligned yesterday now sat scattered. A chill curled along the floorboards. Cold spots appeared, sudden and precise, brushing my ankles. I shivered despite the thick blanket of the room. The walls seemed to stretch. Corners elongated, doorways tilted, just slightly wrong. The ceiling lowered and rose again with the blink of an eye. I could almost hear it pulse, silent and deliberate. A soft, distorted voice muttered from the corner. Not a word I recognized. Just intonation, bending and shifting. I froze. The air thickened around me, heavy and damp. The shadows shifted along the walls. Objects I had touched yesterday felt altered. A chair leaned where it never had. A lamp rested closer to bed, though I remembered moving it back. I breathed slowly. The room smelled faintly of damp earth and something metallic. The floorboards hummed under the weight of nothing. Soft footsteps, imagined or real, brushed my awareness. The flicker returned. Light bent around the corners. Shadows twisted like smoke. I could feel the cabin's presence, alive and watching. I touched the doorframe. Cold, damp. The air hummed softly, vibrating in my chest. The voice muttered again, indistinct, almost mournful. I stepped toward the window. Outside, the forest lay quiet, heavy with fog. Inside, the walls seemed to pulse gently, as if breathing along with me. Objects continued their subtle rearrangement. A book slid closer to the edge of the table. A chair creaked, turning slightly unseen. The light dimmed. The shadows lengthened, curling along the ceiling. I sank into a chair, hands cold against the wood. The voice whispered again, soft and warped. Not words, only cadence. Not anger, not welcome, just awareness. I focused on my breath. The flickering lights softened. Shadows lingered, patient, deliberate. The air smelled of damp pine and lingering smoke. The cold spots faded slowly. The cabin exhaled, a long, slow hum in the bones of the floor. The objects remained slightly displaced, subtle, impossible to ignore. I didn't move for a long time, listening, waiting, feeling the presence of the room and the way it breathed, the way the shadows bent, the way the soft, distorted voice lingered just beyond clarity. Eventually I rose. The cabin remained, unchanged yet wrong, alive in its quiet, patient way. Watching, always watching. The lake lay still, pale light brushing the far shore. Mist curled along the water, cold and heavy. I stepped onto the dock, bare feet brushing the frozen wood. Ice formed beneath me, not scattered, not thin, solid, unnatural. It spread silently, creeping across the planks. Figures moved beneath the surface. Not waves, not fish. Too tall, too still. Just shadows, hovering beneath the frozen water. The lake hummed softly, a vibration that threaded through my chest, through my bones, like it was breathing. I knelt at the edge. Cold air clung to my face. I could see shapes bending, twisting beneath the ice, watching, waiting. Every reflection warped, alive. The mist thickened. It wrapped around my legs, curling like smoke. The hum grew faintly louder, resonating in the silence. Soft whispers brushed at the edges of thought. I stepped forward, careful. Each foot pressed into ice that shivered beneath me. Figures shifted below. Still deliberate, impossible to touch. The air smelled of damp wood, cold water, and something metallic. I held my breath. Every rustle of frozen boards echoed like a warning. Shadows stretched along the underside of the dock. The hum persisted, patient, knowing, a soft movement at the corner of my eye. I turned. Nothing. Only the pale reflection of trees twisting in the water. The ice cracked lightly beneath one foot. The vibration pulsed upward through my body. I felt them beneath. The figures patient, watching. I knelt again, fingertips brushing the surface. The water rippled, despite the ice. Shapes shifted, elongated, unnatural, deliberate, almost like they were trying to reach for me. The mist thickened again, curling against my arms and legs. I smelled wet earth and the faint tang of metal. The hum softened, fading into silence, but the dread remained, pressing against my chest. I pulled my hands back. The ice trembled underfoot. The dock felt alive, watching, waiting. The figures beneath didn't move, but I could feel them, patient, breathing in tandem with the lake. I stepped back slowly. The ice retreated under my weight. Ripples shimmered faintly, reflecting shapes I could not name. Soft whispers brushed my ears, fleeting and indecipherable. I turned away from the water. The lake was still, quiet and pale. The dock beneath my feet held its breath. Every shadow lingered. Every reflection waited. I walked away slowly, the mist curling along my ankles. The hum faded, but the lake remained alive in silence. Even from a distance, I could feel it, watching, patient, waiting. The forest smelled of wet pine and cold earth. Mist clung to the ground, curling around my boots. The wind moved softly, brushing leaves, bending branches. I heard whispers, faint, just beyond understanding. Fragments of sentences drifted through the trees, and a name one I shouldn't know. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the trunks. They reached higher than branches, longer than limbs. The pale light of morning did little to calm them. I walked slowly, feeling the damp needles underfoot. Every rustle felt deliberate. Every movement in the mist seemed aware. The whispers came again. A syllable here, a fragment there. The wind carried them, wrapping around my ears, my hair. I shivered. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp and cold. I stopped. The shadows paused too. Trees leaned just slightly toward me. Leaves whispered softly, brushing against my face. The mist shifted. Soft static seemed to hum in the quiet. A shape flickered at the edge of my vision, gone before I could focus. I kept walking. Branches scratched my arms, damp with dew. The whispers followed, patient, teasing, indecipherable. The name echoed faintly in my mind. Shadows danced between trunks. They twisted long and thin, reaching toward the ground, then melting into the fog. I could feel them watching, always just beyond perception. The wind carried more fragments. Words I didn't understand. Voices soft, deliberate, circling. The forest seemed alive. Patient, waiting. I knelt to touch the moss. Cold, wet, clinging to my fingers. Even the earth seemed aware of my presence. The whispers slowed, then stopped. Only silence remained. I looked up. The shadows lingered, bending in impossible ways. Branches stretched, the mist curling along them like smoke. The forest held its breath. I rose, brushing needles from my coat. Every step sounded impossibly loud in the quiet. The wind shifted again. Whispers returned, faint, teasing, just beyond reach. I walked carefully, slowly, the forest pressing close. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle deliberate, every breath shared with the trees. The mist thinned slightly. The pale light revealed the path ahead. Shadows remained patient and unmoving. The whispers faded into silence. I continued, feeling eyes on me, the name lingering, the forest alive in its quiet, watchful way. And I knew it would wait, always waiting, beyond understanding, just beyond the whispering pines. The lake lay silent, gray mist curling across the surface. Cold air brushed my skin, damp with fog. The scent of wet pine and frozen water pressed close. Far across the water, a lantern appeared. Pale, swinging gently, though no hand held it. Ripples spread across the lake, following its path, deliberate and slow. I stepped closer to the edge. The fog wrapped around my ankles, clinging and cold. The lantern's light reached into it, cutting pale lines through the mist. It beckoned, patient, deliberate. The water hummed softly beneath the glow. Not wind, not movement of a boat. The ripples carried a subtle vibration through the dock, through my bones. I could almost hear it breathe, a soft, static hum that pressed against my chest. The light swung gently, teasing, luring. I held my breath. The fog thickened, curling over the lake like smoke. I stepped forward, careful, each foot pressed into damp boards, cold seeping through. The lantern moved closer, yet still far, its reflection warped across the water, alive and deliberate. The wind shifted. Soft whispers touched my ears. Faint, undecipherable, teasing words. The fog carried them, wrapping around my hair and neck. I knelt at the water's edge. Cold mist brushed my hands. Ripples lapped against my fingers, as if aware. The light swung again, closer now, almost playful. Shadows stretched along the shoreline. Branches leaned into the fog, bending toward the lantern. Every reflection in the water shimmered, distorted, alive. I could feel the lantern watching me. I stood slowly, heart quiet but heavy. The fog wrapped tighter, pressing against my legs. The lantern paused mid-swing, then resumed, moving toward a distant, impossible path. The lake smelled faintly of wetwood, pine, and something metallic. The air hummed gently, vibrating softly in my chest. Ripples followed the lantern with careful, deliberate patience. It was alone, yet not. It wanted me to follow. I didn't move. The fog thickened, curling around the dock. Shadows leaned closer. The lantern swayed gently, beckoning, patient, deliberate. I felt the weight of silence. The lake exhaled around me. The fog twisted and shifted. Ripples shimmered with the lantern's path, stretching, elongating, impossible. I turned back from the edge. Cold air brushed my face. The lantern lingered, swinging softly in the distance. It waited, always waiting, its pale light reaching deep into the fog. And I knew it would not stop. It would wait for me, beyond the fog, beyond the light, patient. The lake lay still under midnight's pale light. Mist clung to the surface, curling softly around the reeds. The air smelled of damp earth and cold water. I knelt at the edge, staring. The reflection should have mirrored me. It did not. The trees bent and twisted unnaturally. Branches reached across the water, elongating in impossible ways. The pale light stretched shadows along the surface, bending them further. A silhouette moved beneath the reflection. Not mine. It mimicked movements I did not make. Slow, deliberate, uncanny. I reached a hand toward the water. Cold mist brushed my fingers. The surface rippled, but the silhouette did not pause. It continued, independent, watching. The lake hummed softly, vibrating through the boards beneath me. The fog thickened around my ankles. The air smelled faintly metallic, like ice forming on stone. I could feel the presence of the reflection, waiting, patient. The trees leaned closer, their shadows bending across the water. The silhouette moved again, imitating gestures I had not made. It was deliberate, impossible, alive. My own breath sounded loud in the quiet, ragged and shallow. I stepped back, shivering. The reflection remained, cold and unyielding, twisting the familiar into something wrong. A soft rustle whispered through the trees. Leaves brushed against one another. The silhouette mirrored it, though I had not moved. It seemed to breathe with the lake, slow and steady. I knelt once more, fingertips brushing the surface. The water was icy, slick. Ripples lapped at my skin like careful, deliberate fingers. The reflection shifted again. The silhouette's head tilted, watching, waiting. The fog pressed closer, curling around my legs. The hum of the lake softened, almost like a heartbeat. Shadows from the trees stretched impossibly long. I could feel the lake holding its breath, the reflection waiting for mine. I rose slowly, brushing mist from my hands. The water remained still. The silhouette mimicked a movement I had not made. My heart thumped against my ribs, loud in the silence. I stepped back from the edge. The fog swirled around me, cold and damp. Branches scratched at my arms, brushing wet against skin. The reflection remained, patient, deliberate, unyielding. I exhaled, trying to steady my breath. The silhouette lingered beneath the frozen water, always mimicking, always waiting. The lake seemed alive, humming softly in the dark. I turned away slowly, feeling eyes on me through the mist, the uncanny stillness pressing against my chest. Even as I walked back, the reflection waited. The lake stayed cold and silent. The fog wrapped around the shore, and the silhouette remained perfect, patient, frozen in the water, mirroring a world that had gone wrong. The lake lay quiet under pale moonlight. Mist curled across the surface, clinging to the shore. The air smelled of cold water and damp pine, thick and heavy. At first, I heard laughter, soft, friendly, distant. It floated across the lake, carried by the wind. I stepped closer to the edge. The boards beneath my feet were slick with dew. The laughter shifted, higher pitched, wrong somehow, too deliberate, too sharp. Ripples formed on the water, moving in ways that made no sense. The echo of the laughter lingered, then faded unnaturally. It was not the wind, not anything I could name, only the sound, hovering in the mist. I turned toward the trees. Shadows stretched long, bending, reaching. Something watched from between the trunks, patient, waiting. The mist wrapped around my legs, cold and wet. Every leaf, every branch whispered against my skin. The laughter came again, closer this time, a soft, teasing rhythm that tugged at the edges of my mind. I held my breath. The forest seemed to exhale with me. Ripples shivered across the lake. Shadows leaned toward the water, impossibly long. I stepped back, careful. The laughter shifted, weaving to the fog, stretching, twisting, unnatural. It was not playful anymore. Something darker lurked beneath the sound. The trees shivered in a gentle wind. Branches scratched against each other, brushing my arms. The mist curled higher, hiding the lake's edge. The echoes lingered, teasing, insistent. I tried to move quietly. Boots pressed into wet moss. The laughter paused, then returned, fractured, warped, floating just beyond reach. I felt it then, presence, something behind the trees. Watching, waiting. The air grew thick, heavy with its awareness. I knelt, fingertips brushing the mist at the water's edge. Cold seeped through my skin, sharp and biting. Ripples lapped softly, echoing the laughter. The shadows seemed to pulse with the sound. I rose slowly. The fog pressed closer. Branches scratched my shoulders. Every breath sounded loud, every heartbeat louder than it should be. The echoes faded slightly, leaving a hollow silence, but I could still feel the presence. Patient, patient, waiting for movement, waiting for attention. I stepped back further. The lake lay still again, pale and reflective, mist curling along its edges. The laughter lingered faintly in memory, like a shadow pressed behind my eyes. I moved away from the water, careful, deliberate. The fog followed, brushing my legs and face. The shadows lingered, stretching, leaning, and I could feel eyes in the trees, watching, always watching, through the echoes of laughter. The cabin smelled of cold wood and damp air. Night pressed against the windows, heavy and still. The floorboards moaned faintly under my weight. The door groaned, a low, drawn-out sound, like breath escaping. I had locked it. I was certain of it. Scratches appeared along the frame. Thin, jagged lines that hadn't been there before. They stretched upward, deliberate, reaching. The walls seemed to pulse gently. The house inhaled and exhaled with me, or perhaps without me. The air felt thick, damp, almost alive. I ran a hand along the door. Rough wood, cold and slightly wet. The scratches looked fresh and deliberate. The floorboard sighed under each step. The ceiling pressed close, heavy with silence. The shadows twisted along the walls, long and thin. I could feel them lean toward me. The groaning continued, soft, patient, like the door itself was trying to speak. The air smelled faintly of pine and something metallic, sharp. Every inhale felt thick, sticky, like fog in my lungs. I stepped back slowly. The door stretched slightly in my vision, elongating, breathing. The scratches pulsed faintly, as if alive. A static hum vibrated through the cabin, low and insistent, pressing against my chest. I could feel the weight of it, patient, deliberate. The house seemed aware of me, waiting. I knelt to touch the floor near the door. Cold seeped through my fingers. The wood felt alive beneath my skin. The groaning paused for a moment, then resumed, softer now, closer to my ear. The shadows shifted. They curled toward the door, then receded. I could see the frame quiver slightly, as if it inhaled with the house itself. I rose slowly, brushing damp mist from my arms. The scratches remained, silent, impossible to ignore. The air hummed softly, vibrating in the corners. The door seemed to watch, patient, deliberate. I stepped away. The groaning faded to a whisper, the cabin exhaling slowly around me. Every shadow lingered, bending and stretching, even as I moved toward the window. I could feel the door, alive and watching, its soft, deliberate groan echoing in my chest. The night held its breath. The cabin waited. The door waited. And I felt the subtle weight of something patient, always patient, pressing close in the cold, damp silence. The fog lay thick across the forest floor. Cold air curled around my ankles. Every breath tasted of damp pine and earth. Shapes moved within the mist. Tall, thin, impossible to focus on. Every time I looked closer, they vanished. Eyes flickered faintly within the fog. Pale light reflected off them, then gone, leaving only the gray swirl behind. I stepped forward carefully. Needles and wet leaves clung to my boots. The fog pressed close, brushing damp against my skin. It felt alive, moving with purpose. A shadow stretched across the ground. It twisted unnaturally, bending toward me. I blinked. It was gone. Soft, rustling whispered through the mist. Branches swayed, brushing my face. The shapes seemed aware of my gaze, always vanishing when observed, always waiting just out of reach. I crouched, fingertips brushing damp moss. Cold seeped through my skin, sharp and biting. The fog seemed thicker here, heavier, laden with something unseen. A faint hum vibrated through the air. Not wind, not movement. Something patient, deliberate. The shapes paused, then melted back into gray. I rose slowly. Mist clung to my arms, wet and cold. The shadows danced at the edges of vision. Eyes flickered again, impossible to track. I turned, thinking I heard footsteps. The fog shifted, curling in shapes that seemed to watch. Every movement felt mirrored. Every breath followed, measured. I took a slow step back. The shapes lingered, twisting, dissolving, never quite still. A metallic tang filled the air, faint, almost imagined. I could feel the fog pressing against my chest. The shadows swirled in impossible patterns. The eyes flickered one last time, then gone, I exhaled slowly. The forest remained quiet. Still, the fog moving softly around me. I walked carefully, each footfall muted in the gray. The shapes were gone, but the unease remained. Patient, waiting. The forest was quiet, thick with fog. Cold air pressed against my face, damp and heavy. The scent of wet earth and pine clung to everything. I walked slowly. Branches scraped my arms. Needles and leaves whispered beneath my boots. Something brushed past my shoulder. Soft, deliberate, impossible to see. No footprints. No trace. Just a lingering chill pressed into my skin. I froze. The air felt heavier, thick with presence. The fog curled closer, brushing my arms and neck. Every rustle seemed closer than it should be. I turned slowly. Nothing. Shadows shifted between the trunks, but no one stood there. The cold lingered. A subtle, sharp bite along my spine. The forest felt alive, breathing, watching. Every step forward pressed the mist against me, like a living thing. I whispered, even though no one could hear. My voice swallowed immediately by the fog. A soft static hum vibrated through the air. Branches swayed slightly, though the wind was still. I felt it again, a brush along my sleeve. Impossible. The forest remained empty. I paused, pressing palms to wet moss. Cold seeped into my fingers, biting deep. Shadows stretched impossibly long, shifting at the edge of perception. The mist swirled around my legs, clinging damp and heavy. The brush had left nothing but the lingering weight of presence. I moved again, slowly, deliberately, each footstep careful. The forest held its breath, the silence pressing closer with every step. The fog shifted. Branches swayed softly, as if guiding me or watching. I could feel eyes tracing every movement. I stopped completely. The cold lingered on my shoulders, though nothing stood there. The forest was patient, and I was not alone. I exhaled slowly. The mist curled around me, brushing damp against my face. The shadows remained, long and still. The chill pressed deep, the brush unseen, but undeniably there. I walked on, each step quiet. The fog wrapped around me, pressing close, deliberate, patient. The forest breathed, and I felt the lingering, cold weight of something that would not be seen, always brushing just behind. The lake stretched into darkness, silvered by pale moonlight. Mist clung to the water's edge, curling around reeds and stones. The air smelled of cold water and wet earth, thick and heavy. A hum began softly, low, vibrating, almost imperceptible. It moved through the fog, brushing my ears, my chest, pressing gently against my skin. I stepped closer to the water. Every movement felt muted in the mist. The boards beneath my feet vibrated faintly, as if the lake was alive, resonating with some secret pulse. The hum grew, steady, hypnotic. I felt it in my bones, in the small of my back, drawing me forward toward the silvered surface. Ripples spread across the water, slow and deliberate. The fog thickened around my legs, damp and cold. Every inhale tasted the lake, metallic and deep. The reflection shimmered, not quite right, bending in gentle waves. I reached toward the water. The hum pressed deeper into my chest. It was patient, insistent, pulling, coaxing. Mist curled around my fingers as they hovered above the surface. The lake seemed to breathe, soft and deliberate. Ripples swirled in impossible patterns, dancing just beyond recognition. I knelt, fingertips brushing the cold water. It shivered beneath my touch, vibrating with a low, steady hum. The air was thick, charged, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Shadows stretched along the shore. Every tree leaned toward the water, every branch whispering against my skin. The hum pressed closer, mesmerizing, inescapable. I rose slowly, trying to resist. The vibration seeped through the boards, through my bones, through the air itself. It was everywhere, patient and deliberate. I stepped back. The fog clung to me, damp and cold. But the lake called still. Its hum lingered in the silence, drawing me closer, mesmerizing, impossible to ignore. The water shimmered beneath pale moonlight. Ripples curved gently, shadows bending along with the pulse. Every breath I took echoed the hum, resonating deep inside. I moved away slowly, but the lake's song followed, wrapping around my legs, pressing against my chest. The fog shifted with each step, softly, patiently, like it knew where I would go. Even as I left the shore, the hum lingered, faint and insistent. It pressed against the mind, against the body, patient, deliberate, waiting for me to return. The sun hung high, pale and unreal. Its light spilled across the clearing, warm on my skin. But something was wrong. Shadows stretched unnaturally, long, thin, twisting along the ground. They didn't match the trees. They leaned, bent, reached in impossible ways. The air smelled of dry earth and pine, but it was thick, almost sticky, like the light itself pressed close. I walked slowly, each step careful. Leaves crunched softly beneath my boots, but the shadows twisted before me, moving even as I paused. The trees leaned slightly, branches curling toward the sky, not swayed by wind, something deliberate, patient. The bark glimmered pale, almost wet, catching the sunlight in odd patterns. Light behaved strangely. It shimmered along the forest floor, skipping over roots and rocks, dancing across my arms. Warm, yet heavy like it had weight. I stopped, hands brushing damp moss. The shadows lingered, bending toward me, then stretching impossibly long behind the trees. I could feel them in my chest, a soft, insistent pressure, breathing with the light. I moved again. Branches whispered against my arms, pale light glinting like frost on needles. The forest seemed alive, but not in a way I could understand. Shadows shifted ahead. The sunlight twisted around them, making them shimmer, pulse, as though waiting for me to look directly. I blinked. They stretched further, defying reason. The air smelled faintly metallic, sharp against the sweetness of pine. I could hear the hum of something low and patient, a vibration beneath my feet, pressing upward into my legs. I exhaled slowly. The shadows remained, leaning, curling. The trees leaned back slightly, as if holding their breath. I walked toward the edge of clearing. Sunlight flickered, shifting across the ground. Shadows pulsed with it, alive, patient, insistent. Even in full light, I felt watched. The forest was quiet, yet it breathed. The shadows pressed close, the sun shimmering strangely along their edges. I stepped back carefully, leaves brushing my boots. The hum beneath my feet lingered, faint, vibrating, impossible place. The clearing held its breath. Light and shadow twisted together. The trees bent slightly, waiting, and I felt the weight of something patient, always just beyond understanding. Pressing close in the warm, strange sunlight, the lake lay still beneath a pale morning sky. Mist curled across the water, thick and damp. The air smelled of wet wood and cold stone. A canoe floated silently near the shore. Empty. No paddle, no sign of life. I stepped closer. Every movement muffled by the fog. The water pressed against the hull, dark and patient. Something watched, not from the trees, not from the shore, from within the canoe itself. I could feel it, subtle and heavy, like breath brushing the back of my neck. The fog thickened, curling around my boots, clinging wet and cold to my legs. The air hummed faintly, vibrating through the boards of the dock. I inhaled slowly. It tasted of lake water and wet earth, sharp and metallic. I reached out, fingertips trembling slightly. The canoe remained empty. Still, I could feel the weight of presence, pressing against the mist, patient, deliberate. Shadows moved across the water, reflections bending strangely along the hull. The fog swallowed everything beyond a few feet, but the canoe remained, watching. I stepped back, careful. Each leaf and twig beneath my boots whispered softly. The air pressed against my chest, damp and insistent. A ripple ran along the hull. No wind, no hand, just the water, vibrating beneath the fog, echoing with a silent presence. I held my breath. The fog pressed closer, curling along my arms. Shadows flickered at the edge of perception. The lake hummed faintly, low, vibrating, drawing me nearer despite myself. I moved away slowly. The canoe drifted, silent and patient. Fog swirled around it, thick and cold, as if hiding something unseen. Every glance back felt like eyes tracing me. The lake was quiet, but heavy, pressing against my senses, insistent, patient, reminded me that some things watch without ever being seen. I exhaled slowly. The mist curled around my shoulders, damp and soft. The canoe remained, floating silently. I could feel its presence, quiet, waiting, and I walked on, leaving the fog and silent watcher behind. Mist curled thickly across the lake, pale and wet. Every breath I took tasted of cold water and moss. The fog wrapped around my arms, heavy and damp. Then I saw them, pairs of eyes, just beyond the veil of mist, watching. They blinked in unison, slowly, measured, almost deliberate. My heart picked up, thumping an echo against the boards beneath my feet. The mist seemed to pulse with each beat, pressing close, damp and cold against my skin. I stepped forward cautiously. The eyes remained, unblinking now, patient. Reflected light shimmered in them, pale and soft, as if they knew I could see them. A rustle in the underbrush. Leaves brushed softly against each other, but nothing emerged. The eyes, they lingered, just at the edge of perception. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. Fog clung to my legs and ankles, dripping cold against my boots. The air tasted faintly metallic, sharp, pressing the pulse of something unseen against my chest. They blinked again, then vanished. No trace remained, only the mist curling, twisting, as if holding its breath. Heartbeats echoed louder now, not just mine, a rhythm that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The fog shifted, curling around trees and rocks, hiding and revealing shadows in unnatural movements. I whisper my own name. The sound dissolved in the mist. The eyes returned, blinking, unblinking, patient, always watching, always waiting just beyond reach. I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. The boards underfoot vibrated faintly, matching the echo of my heart. Mist wrapped around my arms, cold and damp, pressing closer, reminded me that I was not alone. I could feel them in the corners of vision, just beyond what seemed possible. Every tree, every ripple in the water, seemed alive with intent, bending toward me in the pale, damp light. And then they were gone. No eyes, no movement, only the fog, thick and patient, and my own ragged breathing, echoing softly across the silent lake. I stepped back further. The mist shifted behind me, heart still racing, the cold pressing, the weight of being watched lingering. Even as I walked away, the lake hummed faintly, and I felt those eyes still near, blinking, waiting, patient in the fog. The lake lay wrapped in fog, pale and unmoving. Cold air pressed against my skin, damp and heavy. Every breath tasted of water and earth, thick with mist. Then I heard it, a voice, soft, almost fragile, calling my name. It moved across the lake, not with the wind, not with the ripples. Impossible to place, impossible to reach. I froze. The water lapped gently at the shore. The fog curled around my ankles, damp and insistent. The voice came again, closer, yet still distant. Faint and longing, I stepped forward. The boards beneath my feet whispered, damp and cold. Every step echoed, swallowed quickly by the thick mist. The voice answered my movement, rising and falling with the fog. It lingered, patient and deliberate, pulling, coaxing, soft as a breath against my ear. Shadows shifted across the water. Reflections bent unnaturally. Mist wrapped around my arms, chilling, pressing. The voice repeated my name. Soft, insistent, the tone almost familiar, but wrong in a way I couldn't place. I looked around. Nothing moved. Trees bowed in silence. Leaves rustled faintly in the fog. Yet the voice remained, sliding through the mist like a living thing. I held my breath. Cold damp pressed into my lungs. The fog thickened, curling along the lake's edge, hiding and revealing shapes that shouldn't exist. The voice whispered again. A gentle tug at my chest. An impossible longing carried on water and fog. I tried to answer, but my voice dissolved into mist. It swallowed my words, leaving only the echo of my heartbeat and the relentless pull of the unseen presence. The lake hummed faintly. Soft waves licked against the dock. The air felt alive, vibrating with something unseen. The voice repeated my name once more, soft, patient, drawing me closer while the fog thickened around my legs. I stepped back slowly. Mist clung to my coat, cold and wet. The voice lingered, fading, yet never fully gone. It hovered just beyond sight, stretching across the lake like a hand I could almost feel, but never touch. I walked away. Boards groaned beneath my feet. The fog whispered past, and the lake remained quiet, but I could still feel it, that impossible voice watching, calling, waiting. The forest breathed in soft shadows. Moonlight scattered through bare branches, pale and uncertain. The air smelled damp and earthy, thick with fog. A path stretched ahead, faintly glowing, almost alive. Soft light shimmered on the leaves. Each step I took felt heavier, as if the ground itself whispered. Then I noticed them, footsteps ahead, slow, measured, but no one walked them. Nothing moved except the fog curling around my ankles. Shadows stretched along the trees. They bent where the light should not allow. They flickered, folding into themselves, then standing again. The forest was wrong. Alive, yet hollow. I stepped closer to the glowing path. The earth beneath my feet felt damp, yielding. A faint hum rose from somewhere unseen. It resonated in my chest, soft, steady, impossible to ignore. The footsteps repeated. Closer, then farther. I could almost hear the soles brushing the soil. But no one appeared. Only the path, glowing, guiding, calling. A breeze rustled through the leaves. Cold touched my neck, lingered, crawling along my spine. The shadows moved again. Logic bent around them. The light flickered with them, as if breathing. I tried to follow the steps. The path wavered beneath my gaze. Soft whispers trailed the fog. I felt watched, alone, yet surrounded. Every sound I made, my breath, my heartbeat, felt loud, sharp. The footsteps paused when I paused. The path pulsed faintly under mist. Shadows danced against reason. A branch snapped behind me. Silence returned too quickly. I moved forward. The fog wrapped my arms. The glowing path shivered beneath my feet. Footsteps lingered ahead, just beyond reach. The forest exhaled around me. I couldn't tell if I was following them or if they were following me. The light bent softly around the trees. Shadows moved with it, impossible to name. I stopped. The footsteps vanished. The hum faded. Only the faint glow remained, pale and trembling along the path. I stayed for a long moment, listening, breathing, feeling the forest hold its secret, patient and waiting. Then I stepped back. The path flickered one last time, and the forest swallowed it, leaving only fog, shadows, and quiet. The tree-line waited, still and quiet. The fog curled low along the grass, pale light spilling through its fingers. The air smelled cold and damp, pressed close to my skin. And then I saw it, a figure, pale as washed bone, standing at the edge of the trees. It didn't move at first, just watched. I shifted slightly. It did the same. A mirror of my motions, subtle and precise. My breath caught. The forest held its silence. I stepped forward. So, did it. I turned. It turned. The sound of my boots against the wet earth felt deafening. The figure remained quiet, always quiet. Shadows from the trees bent toward it. The fog wrapped its limbs, as if hiding it and revealing it at the same time. I reached out a hand. It mimicked me. A soft shiver crawled up my spine. The wind stirred. It carried the scent of wet pine and something faintly metallic. The figure stepped closer, then paused. It lingered on the edge of the fog. Closer, then farther. I wanted to run. The earth felt heavy beneath my feet. The fog seemed to thicken, cling to my skin, tug at my hair. Every heartbeat echoed like a drum in an empty hall. I blinked. It blinked. The figure's face remained featureless, pale, unreadable. A shadow shifted behind it. I wasn't sure if it moved or if I imagined it. Soft rustling of leaves. A distant hum in the mist. The figure's movements grew more deliberate. Closer, closer. Then it retreated, folding into the fog. I froze. The silence pressed in. Only the hum lingered, vibrating in my chest. I felt eyes upon me, though nothing remained in sight. I stepped forward again. The fog parted slightly, revealing it once more. Every motion I made, it repeated. Every hesitation mirrored. Alone, but not alone. The pale figure lingered at the tree-line, its form blurred in the mist, stretching, folding, impossible to fully see. It approached slowly, then paused again. A soft static hung in the air. I couldn't breathe without hearing it echo. I tried to speak. No sound came. My voice dissolved into the fog. The figure mimicked my silence. I stepped backward. So, did it. And then, just beyond reach, it stopped, stayed there, watching. The fog swallowed it gradually, folding its edges around the pale shape. The air grew cold, almost wet. The tree-line seemed to lean inward, listening. I stood there, shivering, as if the forest itself held its breath. And when I finally moved, the figure didn't follow. Not yet, but I could feel it in the fog, folding and stretching just beyond vision, waiting. The forest waits. Night drapes itself over the trees, thick and heavy. A faint chill clings to my skin, settling in my shoulders. I hear it again. The rustle, soft at first, like a finger tracing along dry leaves. Closer than last night. The fog presses against the trunks. It smells of wet earth, of cold moss. Every step I take seems to vanish in silence. Yet the rustling follows. I pause. It pauses too. The forest feels alive. Listening. Waiting. Shadows stretch unnaturally under the pale moonlight. A branch quivers. The hum of the night carries faint static, like the air itself is vibrating. The rustle comes again, nearer this time, brushing along the edge of perception. I swallow. The taste of damp wood fills my mouth. Every leaf, every twig underfoot, sounds impossibly loud. Soft footsteps. Not mine, but no one is there. The fog shifts. A shape flickers between the trees. Gone before I can focus. The rustle it repeats. Closer, closer. I feel the pressure of unseen eyes. They press through the mist, tracing me, bending the air around me. The forest exhales with me, or maybe against me. A cold draft runs down my neck. I shiver. I step forward cautiously. The fog curls around my ankles. It wraps, tightens, almost tangible. The rustle comes again. It lingers too long, as if tasting the air I breathe. The ground beneath my feet seems to shift. Branches sway without wind. Leaves lift softly, falling in slow spirals. I hear my own heartbeat in my ears, but it's not mine alone. I stop, hold my breath. Silence stretches, long and hollow. The rustling returns, slower now. Patient, waiting. A shadow moves against the curve of the tree. Not quite human, not quite animal. Its presence brushes at the edge of my vision. Gone if I look directly. I shiver again. Cold bites into my arms, settling in my chest. The smell of wet pine sharpens. Something unseen brushes past, just grazing my shoulder. No footprints, no marks, only the lingering chill. The rustle repeats nightly. Every night it comes closer. I feel it everywhere now. In the fog, in the trees, in the spaces between my thoughts. I take a step back. The forest exhales. The rustling slows, fading, until only silence remains. But I know it will return. Every night, closer, watching, waiting. And I cannot see it, cannot touch it, cannot escape the feeling that it knows me. I walk on, heart heavy, fog curling at my ankles, leaves whispering underfoot, knowing it is there. Always there. The cabin sits quiet. Pale light seeps through the cracks in the walls. Dust floats in the air, motionless, yet heavy. I pass the mirror. At first, nothing seems wrong. Then a flicker. A shadow lingers too long in the corner of the glass. My reflection smiles. I do not. A cold wave crawls down my spine. The air tastes faintly metallic. I step closer. The floorboards hum softly beneath my weight. Breath catches in my throat. The shadow stretches along the frame, breathing with me, but separate. I touch the mirror. Smooth, cold, unyielding. My hand is reflected, but there is something else. A movement, subtle, not mine. The room tilts slightly. Walls seem to bend, closing inward. Light fractures across the glass, forming thin, wavering lines. I hear a soft static in the hum of the cabin. I blink. The reflection shifts again. Eyes linger just a fraction too long. Smiles form that I never made. I pull back, but the glass holds them, frozen. A draft brushes my neck. I shiver. The mirror seems to breathe with the cabin. Soft footsteps echo behind me. Though I am alone, the reflection does not mimic them. I tilt my head. Shadows in the mirror move counter to mine. 1 inch forward while I step back. A shiver of wrongness crawls through the air. The scent of old wood and something faintly sweet presses in. A whisper of static, a murmur, a breath that isn't mine. The reflection's eyes blink in unison with mine, then linger open when mine close. I stare, frozen. The mirror watches. Every movement I make anticipated, altered, inverted. The smiles widen. Shadows stretch beyond the frame. I take a step away. The mirror seems to swell in the dim light, drawing the room in with it, filling the air with an almost imperceptible pressure. The hum thickens, vibrating against my chest. A faint creak from the cabin floor. A breath, held or exhaled, I cannot tell. The mirror pulses softly, a heart-beating glass. I touch it again. Cold runs to my fingers, spreading warmth in a reflection that shouldn't be there. The smile twists slightly, acknowledging me, though I do not acknowledge it. The cabin grows still. Even the dust seems suspended. The hum lingers faintly. Shadows dissolve slightly, but the reflection remains. I turn away, walk to the door. The mirror does not release me. It waits, silently, patiently. A final glance over my shoulder. The smile persists. The shadow tilts with the frame, not quite alive, not quite still. I close the door behind me. The cabin exhales. But I know it waits, always waits. The fog hangs thick over the lake. It swallows the shoreline, the trees, the pale light of late afternoon. Every step on the damp grass feels heavier than the last. I reach the water's edge. Black in endless stretches beneath the mist. The surface moves unnaturally, silent, smooth, like glass stretched over shadows. Shapes drift just on the surface. I catch glimpses, fleeting. They vanish before I can focus. A shiver snakes along my spine. The air is damp, tasting faintly of earth and cold metal. The fog presses against my skin, chilling my shoulders. Every breath feels shallow, as though the lake is breathing with me. I lean closer. The water hums softly, vibrating through my feet, my chest. A rhythm, steady and quiet, almost like a pulse. I hear something else, soft, uneven breathing. I freeze. It is not mine. The fog thickens. Shadows move beneath the black surface, slipping against the light. My reflection is fractured. Shapes ripple where my body should be mirrored. An arm moves that I did not raise. A head tilts where my neck remains still. I step back. The fog rolls forward, carrying a whisper of wet earth, of decay. The black water shifts slightly, reflecting nothing, yet hinting at everything beneath. I feel drawn in. The breathing grows softer, closer. It blends with the hum of the water, the sigh of the fog. I catch a glimpse of a form just beneath the surface, pale and still. Then it vanishes. I crouch, fingertips skimming the edge of the water. The chill bites through my skin, climbing my arms. The lake is silent for a heartbeat. Then the hum returns, low and insistent, wrapping around me. I can almost feel the shapes moving below. Curved lines, unformed, shifting under the blackness. Eyes, or shadows that feel like eyes, flicker beneath the surface. They vanish if I stare too long. The fog presses closer, muffling the world. Even the trees are swallowed, leaving me alone with the hum, the black water, the soft breathing. It is not threatening. It is waiting. I breathe. The fog curls around my shoulders, clinging like silk. Every movement feels mirrored somewhere beneath the surface. A soft ripple dances outwards. I dare to step closer. The water shivers beneath my feet, alive, cold. My own reflection wavers, dissolving into shadow shapes. The soft breathing moves impossibly, like it is circling me. I want to step back, but fascination roots me to the edge. The lake hums louder, vibrating through bone and blood. Shapes float nearer, glimpsed through fog, then swallowed again. The air tastes damp, metallic, and faintly sweet. Every nerve hums with the impossible stillness. I imagine hands reaching from below, but the lake does not strike. It waits. It watches. I hear the softest inhalation, a breath that moves with the fog. I step back slowly, each movement mirrored in ripples beneath the surface. The fog thins slightly, revealing the trees behind me. Shadows stretch long, bending unnaturally with the waning light. The black water calms, reflecting nothing but dark. The hum lingers, quiet, a memory in the bones. I turn away from the lake. The shapes are gone. The soft breathing fades. But I know it waits beneath the fog, always beneath. The fog drifts heavier tonight. It rolls over the lake, curling into the trees, swallowing the cabin in a pale, silent haze. The air tastes damp, metallic, thick with cold. Shadows stretch along the shoreline. Shapes gather just beyond sight, still as statues. I feel them before I see them. Presence brushing against the edges of thought. The cabin seems smaller under the fog, would groan softly beneath the weight of silence. Every floorboard hums beneath my feet. I step toward the porch. The lake hums low, deep, vibrating through the air, through my chest, through my bones. It is steady, final, a note that lingers longer than it should. The silhouettes shift. Closer. They do not breathe. They do not speak. Yet I know they are aware of me. A rustle of leaves. A soft footstep. Impossible to locate, yet unmistakable. The fog seems to follow, curling around me like slow smoke. I pause. The cabin door creaks. Locked, or at least it should be. The hinges groan as though the house itself is exhaling. Cold presses against my shoulders. The fog swirls, forming shapes that vanish when looked at directly. Eyes, or illusions of eyes, glint faintly in the mist. The lake hums again, rising and falling, almost like a voice calling me closer. I taste salt and wet earth in the air. Every nerve thrums with awareness. I step back. A silhouette mimics my motion from the fog. It tilts its head, silent, unmoving, a reflection of myself I did not know existed. The cabin breathes around me. Walls pulse gently as though alive. Floorboards sigh under invisible weight. The lake hums a final note, low and resonant, vibrating through skin, through floor, through fog. The fog pulses with it, rolling and shifting, carrying a presence I cannot see but cannot ignore. I hear it then, a whisper carried across the water, impossible to locate. It is my name, soft, distant, intimate, echoing in the fog and the hum. The door creaks again, slightly ajar now. I do not remember unlocking it. The air from inside is colder than the night, smelling faintly of wood and wet earth. Shadows press at the edge of vision. They gather closer. The fog wraps tighter, pulling at my skin, my thoughts, my heartbeat. I can't move. I can't step back. The lake, the fog, the silhouettes, all watch, all wait. Breath catches in my chest. I hear my pulse echo in my ears. The lake hums one last time. Then silence, but it is not quiet. It vibrates beneath the fog, beneath the trees, beneath me. I step forward, drawn, and the door creaks wider. The cabin waits, silent. The fog folds around it, shapes moving inside the haze. I am not alone. I never was. The silhouettes linger. The fog lingers. The hum lingers. And the door is open,